The first sensation I remember was cold. Not the kind of cold you feel on a winter morning, but a bone-deep chill that seemed to freeze every cell in my body. I was floating in some kind of liquid, thick and blue-tinted, like antifreeze, but with the consistency of syrup. Through the distortion of the containment chamber's curved glass, I could make out the blurred shapes of people moving around in white hazmat suits, their faces obscured behind thick protective masks. The underground facility that housed me was buried deep within the Rocky Mountains, so far from civilization that the closest town was nothing more than a speck on a map. Project Sentinel, they called it, a fitting name for an organization dedicated to creating the perfect guardian against threats that most people believed existed only in nightmares and campfire stories. I learned later that I had been in development for 15 years before gaining consciousness. They had tried hundreds of combinations of genetic material, splicing together DNA from various sources, both terrestrial and, if the whispered conversations I overheard were true, extraterrestrial. I was their 47th attempt at creating a viable hybrid. The previous 46 had either died during development or gone insane shortly after awakening. Something about my particular genetic cocktail proved more stable than the rest. Dr. Isabella Blackwood was the first person I saw clearly when they finally drained the chamber. She stood there in her pristine white lab coat, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, watching me with eyes that held equal parts pride and clinical detachment. "Subject 47, she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "Can you understand me?" I could do more than understand. I could analyze her heart rate, body temperature, and the slight elevation in her blood pressure that betrayed her excitement despite her composed exterior. My enhanced senses were already working overtime, processing information at a rate that would have overwhelmed a normal human brain. "Yes," I replied, my voice rough from disuse. The word felt strange in my mouth, like my tongue was too thick. "I understand everything." The next few weeks were filled with tests. They pushed my body to its limits, documenting every aspect of my enhanced abilities. I could lift several times my body weight, run at speeds that would make an Olympic sprinter look like they were standing still, and most impressively, alter my skin's composition to blend perfectly with my surroundings. Like a chameleon, they said, though I knew the comparison barely scratched the surface of what I could do. The combat training was intense. They threw everything they had at me: special forces operators, advanced combat robots, and even simulated cryptid encounters. I learned to fight in every conceivable environment, from Arctic tundra to dense jungle. My body adapted to each scenario, my chameleonic abilities extending beyond mere camouflage, to include resistance to extreme temperatures and environmental hazards. But it was during the quiet moments between training sessions and tests that I began to notice things, little inconsistencies in what they told me about my purpose. Dr. Blackwood would sometimes watch me with an expression that seemed almost guilty, and then there were the dreams, fragments of memories that didn't feel like my own. A family photo, a child's laughter, the smell of pine needles on a warm summer day. I started asking questions during my sessions with Dr. Blackwood, simple ones at first, about my creation and purpose. She answered them all with practiced ease, but I could detect the subtle changes in her physiological responses that indicated she wasn't telling me everything. The more I pushed, the more evasive she became. One night, as I lay in my containment cell, I overheard a conversation between Dr. Blackwood and another scientist. They were discussing my progress, but something in their tone made me focus my enhanced hearing more intently. "The integration is better than we could have hoped," the male voice said. "The original genetic material proved remarkably stable." "We can't be certain it will hold," Dr. Blackwood replied. "The others showed promise too until they remembered." The man's voice dropped lower. "That won't happen with 47. We've taken precautions this time. The memory suppression is holding." Memory suppression. Those two words triggered something in me, a cascade of questions I hadn't even known to ask. What memories were they suppressing? Who had I been before becoming Subject 47? I didn't let on that anything had changed, but from that moment on, I began to pay closer attention to everything around me. I memorized the facility's layout during training exercises, noted the guard rotation patterns, and studied the security systems, all while maintaining the perfect facade of the obedient weapon they had created. Then came the news of my first real mission. A small town in the Pacific Northwest had reported a series of disappearances. Local authorities were baffled, but Project Sentinel's intelligence suggested it was the work of a particularly aggressive Sasquatch. I was to be deployed immediately. As Dr. Blackwood briefed me on the mission parameters, I could see the concern in her eyes. Not for the missing people, I realized, but for what this mission might reveal to me. She handed me a specialized weapon, a nerve toxin delivery system designed specifically for cryptid physiology. "Remember your training," she said, her hand lingering on the weapon case. "And remember, Subject 47, some questions are better left unanswered." But as I prepared for deployment, I knew I was done accepting their answers. This mission wouldn't just be about hunting a cryptid. It would be my chance to uncover the truth about what I really was and what Project Sentinel was truly trying to achieve. The next morning, they loaded me into a black helicopter with unmarked sides. As we lifted off from the hidden mountain base, I watched Dr. Blackwood's figure grow smaller until she disappeared entirely. Little did she know, she wasn't just sending their perfect weapon into the field. She was releasing someone who was finally ready to think for themselves. The real hunt was about to begin, but I wasn't sure anymore who was the hunter and who was the prey. The helicopter touched down in a clearing just before dawn, the rotors whipping the morning mist into ghostly shapes. Through the thick canopy of evergreens, I could smell the rich earth and decay of the Olympic Peninsula's ancient forests. My enhanced senses picked up every detail: the steady drip of condensation from needle-laden branches, the scurrying of small animals in the underbrush, and something else, something that didn't belong in these woods. I stepped out onto the soft ground, my specially designed combat suit automatically adjusting its coloration to match the surrounding foliage. The pilot didn't say a word as he lifted off, leaving me alone in the wilderness. I had everything I needed: advanced weaponry, survival gear, and my own abilities. According to my briefing, the town of Pine Haven lay 5 miles to the northeast, but my first priority was establishing a baseline for the creature's movement patterns. The morning air was thick with fog as I made my way through the forest. My footsteps were silent, a skill honed through countless hours of training. I came across the first sign of the Sasquatch's presence about 2 miles in, a massive footprint pressed deep into the mud near a creek bed. But something about it felt wrong. I knelt down to examine it more closely, my enhanced vision picking up details that would have been invisible to normal eyes. The print was nearly 20 inches long, which matched known Sasquatch dimensions, but the depth and spacing of the toe impression suggested something about the creature's gait that contradicted every file I'd studied. This thing wasn't just walking, it was adapting its movement patterns to appear more bestial than it actually was. I followed the trail deeper into the forest, documenting more evidence of the creature's passage. Broken branches hung at heights of over 8 feet, and some trees bore deep claw marks that seemed more ritualistic than random. My training had prepared me for tracking cryptids, but nothing in the Project Sentinel databases had mentioned anything about one displaying this level of intelligence. As I approached the outskirts of Pine Haven, I activated my skin's camouflage response, becoming nearly invisible to the naked eye. The town was small, just a few thousand people, with the kind of close-knit community where everyone knew everyone else's business. Perfect cover for something that didn't want to be found. I made my way to the local ranger station, where I found James Cooper, the lead ranger, poring over maps spread across his desk. He was in his late 40s, with weathered features and eyes that had seen too much in recent weeks. According to my briefing, he'd been the first to officially document the disappearances. "Can I help you?" he asked as I entered, not looking up from his maps. I had deactivated my camouflage and was wearing the appearance of a federal wildlife agent, one of several cover identities provided by Project Sentinel. "Agent Thomas Blake," I said, using the name from my cover documents. "I'm here about the missing hikers." Cooper finally looked up, his expression guarded. Another fed. We've already had the FBI out here. They said it was probably bears. We both know it wasn't bears, I replied, studying his reaction. His heart rate spiked slightly. He knew more than he was letting on. He sighed, rubbing his face with calloused hands. No, it wasn't bears. I've been tracking whatever this thing is for weeks. Found things that don't make any sense. He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. Things I didn't tell the FBI about. The folder contained dozens of photographs, each more disturbing than the last. The creature wasn't just hunting, it was setting up elaborate scenes with its kills, arranging them in patterns that seemed to hold some deeper significance. But most troubling were the pictures of unusual equipment found near some of the sites, sophisticated tracking devices and sampling kits that looked eerily similar to Project Sentinel technology. There's something else, Cooper said, lowering his voice. Last week, I found a campsite up near Devil's Ridge. Everything was torn apart, but I found this. He reached into another drawer and pulled out a small metal case bearing an insignia I recognized instantly. It was the same one emblazoned on all Project Sentinel equipment. My mind raced. Why would Project Sentinel technology be here before my arrival? According to my briefing, this was supposed to be the first official investigation of the area. I maintained my cover, examining the case with pretended ignorance. Any idea what it is? I asked. Cooper shook his head. It's locked tight. But after I found it, things got worse. The disappearances increased and, he hesitated, I started seeing lights up in the mountains and hearing sounds, not animal sounds, but not human either, like something trying to mimic human speech. I was about to respond when my enhanced hearing picked up something outside, a low-frequency rumble that shouldn't have been there, accompanied by the subtle shift in air pressure that indicated movement of something large. Through the station's window, I caught a glimpse of a shadow passing through the trees at the forest's edge, too quick and too tall to be human. Stay here, I told Cooper, already moving toward the door. Lock everything down and don't open up for anyone but me. Wait, he called after me. What are you going to do? I paused at the threshold, my skin already beginning to shift and adapt. I'm going hunting. As I stepped outside, I allowed my true abilities to surface. My muscles tensed and reformed, becoming denser and more powerful. My vision shifted through multiple spectrums, picking up heat signatures and motion trails. The creature was moving fast, heading toward the mountains, but I could move faster. I pursued it through the deepening shadows of the forest, my own footsteps silent as I closed the distance. But with each mile we traveled, my suspicions grew stronger. This was no ordinary hunt. The creature's movement patterns were too precise, too calculated. It wasn't running from me, it was leading me somewhere. As night fell and the forest grew darker, I realized I was about to discover whether I was truly the hunter Project Sentinel had created me to be, or if I was just another piece in a game whose rules I didn't yet understand. The truth waited somewhere ahead in the darkness, and I was finally ready to face it. The creature's trail led me deep into the mountains, far beyond the normal patrol routes. The moon cast long shadows through the trees, but my enhanced vision cut through the darkness like a knife. As I tracked the beast, I noticed something peculiar. The forest had grown unnaturally quiet. No insects chirping, no nocturnal animals moving through the underbrush. Everything was still, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Then I saw it. A structure nestled into the side of the mountain, nearly invisible to the untrained eye. It was an old research station, its exterior weathered and covered in moss, but I could detect the hum of active power systems beneath the abandoned facade. The creature's tracks led directly to a heavy metal door partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. My instincts screamed that this was a trap, but I had to know what lay behind that door. I approached cautiously, my chameleonic skin matching the texture and color of the surrounding rock. The door's security system was sophisticated, exactly the same model used in Project Sentinel's mountain facility. I placed my hand on the scanner, and to my surprise, it clicked open. Inside, emergency lights cast a sickly green glow across empty corridors. The air was stale, tinged with the sharp smell of industrial cleaners and something else, something organic and wrong. My footsteps echoed softly as I moved deeper into the facility, every sense on high alert. The first room I entered was filled with banks of old computers and monitoring equipment. Most of the screens were dark, but one still flickered with life. As I approached, text began scrolling across the display. Subject 47 successfully acquired target location Phase 2. Initialization protocols engaged awaiting genetic resonance confirmation. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't just another facility. They had been expecting me. The whole mission, from the very beginning, had been orchestrated. But why? Moving deeper into the complex, I found laboratories filled with familiar equipment. Gene sequencers, containment chambers, and monitoring systems identical to those used in my creation. But these weren't sterile and well-maintained like the ones I knew. These were stained with old blood and showed signs of desperate struggle. In one lab, I found a journal. The entries dated back 15 years, around the time of my supposed creation. As I read, the truth began to unfold with horrifying clarity. Project Sentinel hadn't created me to hunt cryptids. They had created me from them. The genetic material used in my development hadn't just been random samples. It had come from creatures captured and brought to facilities like this one, tortured and experimented on until their very essence could be harvested and combined. A noise from deeper within the facility caught my attention, the sound of heavy breathing and claws scraping against metal. I followed it to a massive chamber that must have been carved directly into the mountain's heart. The room was circular, with observation windows lining the upper level, and there, in the center, stood the creature I had been tracking. But it wasn't a Sasquatch, at least not entirely. Like me, it was a hybrid, a twisted combination of multiple species. Its eyes held an intelligence that mirrored my own, and as it straightened to its full height, I realized with growing horror that its basic genetic structure was almost identical to mine. "Brother," it spoke, its voice a guttural approximation of human speech. "They said you would come." Before I could respond, the facility's speakers crackled to life. Dr. Blackwood's voice filled the chamber, but it wasn't coming from a recording. She was here, watching. "Subject 47, she said, her tone clinical but tinged with something that might have been regret. "You've performed exactly as expected. Your tracking abilities and problem-solving skills have exceeded all parameters, but now it's time for your final test." Security doors slammed shut, sealing me in the chamber with the creature. Warning lights began to flash as a countdown appeared on the observation windows. "Only one hybrid can leave this facility," Dr. Blackwood continued. "We need to know which genetic combination is truly superior. The survivor will become the template for our next generation of hunters." The creature, my brother in more ways than I could have imagined, lowered itself into a fighting stance. "I'm sorry," it growled, "but I've been here for months, fighting others like us. I won't die in this place." As we circled each other, my mind raced. Everything I thought I knew about my purpose, about Project Sentinel, about myself, had been a lie. The missing hikers, the mysterious tracks, the elaborate setup, it had all been designed to draw me here, to this moment. But they had made one crucial mistake. In creating me to be the perfect hunter, they had also given me the ability to think for myself. And as I looked at the creature before me, I didn't see a target to be eliminated. I saw another victim of Project Sentinel's ruthless ambition. I straightened from my combat stance and did something that wasn't in any of my programming. I smiled. "What if," I said, both to my opponent and to the observers I knew were watching, "neither of us has to die today?" The creature paused, confusion visible in its inhuman features. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Because sometimes, the greatest power isn't in being the perfect weapon, it's in choosing not to be a weapon at all. The observation room erupted in chaos as alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Blackwood's voice cut through the noise, sharp with anger and disbelief. "Subject 47, you are disobeying direct orders. Stand down immediately." I turned to face the observation window, my enhanced vision piercing the darkened glass to see the panic on the faces of the Project Sentinel staff. "My name," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "is not Subject 47, and I don't take orders from you anymore." The other hybrid, he called himself Atlas, moved to stand beside me. Together, we faced the window as security doors began to seal the facility. They thought they could contain us, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. They had designed us to be the ultimate hunters, to overcome any obstacle. The ventilation system, Atlas growled softly. They'll try to gas us first. He was right. I could already smell the sweet, chemical odor beginning to seep through the vents, but our enhanced physiologies, designed to adapt to any environment, were already adjusting. What would have knocked out a normal person merely made us dizzy for a few moments. Watch, I told Atlas, and activated my chameleonic abilities. My skin shifted, matching the exact pattern and texture of the facility's walls. Atlas's eyes widened in recognition. He could do the same thing, but had never considered using it this way. Together, we became nearly invisible, two shadows moving among shadows. The security teams burst into the chamber, their tactical gear and weapons useless against opponents they couldn't see. We moved silently, disabling them with precise strikes. Not killing, I had done enough of that. These were just people following orders, like I had once been. We fought our way up to the observation level, where we found Dr. Blackwood attempting to delete files from the main computer system. She spun around as we entered, her hand moving toward an alarm button. "Don't," I said, letting my camouflage fade. "Enough people have been hurt today." Her fingers froze above the button. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes, not of what I might do to her, but of what her creation had become. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "What we did, it was necessary. The creatures we used, the experiments. Humanity needs protection." "Protection," Atlas snarled. "Or weapons. How many of us did you create and destroy before you got what you wanted?" I moved to the computer terminal, my enhanced intelligence allowing me to bypass security protocols that would have taken teams of hackers hours to crack. The files told a story more horrifying than I had imagined. Project Sentinel hadn't just been creating hunters, they had been systematically capturing and experimenting on cryptids for decades. The creatures they claimed were threats to humanity were actually ancient guardians, maintaining a delicate balance in the world's hidden places. By turning them into weapons, Project Sentinel had disrupted that balance. "The disappearances in town," I said, turning to Dr. Blackwood. "Those weren't caused by random cryptid attacks, were they? They were your failed experiments, breaking free and lashing out." She didn't answer, but her expression told me everything. I continued downloading files, uncovering locations of other facilities, names of officials involved, details of experiments that turned my stomach. Atlas stood guard, his enhanced senses alert for approaching security teams. "You know we can't let you continue this work," I told her. "It ends today." "You'll never shut us down completely," she replied, a hint of her old confidence returning. "Project Sentinel has branches everywhere, contingency plans." Her words were cut off by a deep rumbling that shook the entire facility. Atlas tilted his head, his enhanced hearing picking up something in the distance. "Others," he said. "They're breaking free." The power fluctuated, emergency lights casting strange shadows across the walls. Through the facility's windows, I could see movement in the forest. Large shapes emerging from hidden entrances and containment areas. Project Sentinel's other experiments were loose, and they were angry. "How many?" I asked Atlas. "Dozens," he replied. "Some like us, others different. They've been waiting for this moment." I turned back to Dr. Blackwood, who had gone pale. "You have a choice," I told her. "Help us free them safely, or watch as they tear this place apart with everyone inside." She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps seeing for the first time the true magnitude of what she had helped create. Then, slowly, she reached for the facility's main control panel. "The containment protocols," she said quietly. "I can override them, give them a chance to escape without bloodshed, but you have to promise me something." "What?" "Don't let them destroy everything. Some of our research, it could help people if used properly. The healing factors, the adaptive abilities, they could save lives." I looked at Atlas, seeing the same understanding in his eyes. We were weapons who had chosen to be something more. Maybe some good could come from all this pain after all. We'll save what we can, I promised. But Project Sentinel, as you know, it is finished. As Dr. Blackwood entered the override codes, I felt something shift in the air, a change in pressure as dozens of containment cells opened simultaneously throughout the mountain. The facility trembled with the movement of creatures breaking free from their prisons. But this was just the beginning. We had the names and locations of other facilities, other experiments. Tonight, we would free this facility. Tomorrow, we would begin dismantling Project Sentinel piece by piece. And after that, we would find a new purpose for ourselves, these hybrids and cryptids who had never asked to be turned into weapons. The hunt wasn't over, it was just beginning, but this time, we were hunting for justice. The mountain facility had become a war zone. Alarms blared through every corridor as freed experiments made their way to the surface. Some were like Atlas and me, hybrids created through genetic manipulation. Others were pure cryptids, ancient creatures that had been captured and tortured in the name of science. All of them were angry, and all of them wanted revenge. But revenge wasn't what we needed. Not now. Listen to me, my voice carried through the chaos, enhanced vocal cords allowing me to be heard above the din. We can tear this place apart, or we can use it. Make your choice. The creatures paused, dozens of eyes turning toward me, some human, some decidedly not. I could feel their rage, their pain, their desire to destroy everything Project Sentinel had built. I understood it because I felt it too. They made us into weapons, I continued. But we can choose to be something else. Guardians, protectors, what we were always meant to be. A massive figure stepped forward, a Wendigo, its antlered head nearly brushing the ceiling. Its voice was like ice cracking. Why should we listen to you, Hunter? Because I know where the other facilities are, I replied, and I know how to shut them down without bloodshed. Dr. Blackwood stood beside me, her presence drawing snarls from the assembled creatures, but she held her ground. The outside world isn't ready to know about you, she said, but we can use Project Sentinel's resources to protect you instead of exploit you. Atlas moved through the crowd, his huge form commanding respect. I've fought beside him, he growled. He speaks the truth. This is our chance to end the hunting, to find peace. The Wendigo considered this, its ancient eyes holding centuries of wisdom and pain. Finally, it nodded. Show us your plan, Hunter. Over the next hour, we transformed the facility's command center into our base of operations. Dr. Blackwood's access codes gave us everything: locations, security protocols, staff rotations. Project Sentinel had facilities in every corner of the globe, each one holding its own dark secrets. But we had something they didn't expect, an army of the very creatures they had tried to control. 6 primary facilities, I explained, highlighting locations on the global display, each one specializing in different types of experiments. We hit them simultaneously, overwhelm their security, and free everyone inside before they can initiate containment protocols. And then what? Asked a voice from the shadows. One of the skinwalkers, its form shifting constantly between human and animal shapes. We can't hide forever. No, I agreed. But we can protect ourselves. Project Sentinel built this facility into a mountain for a reason. It's defensible, isolated, and fully equipped. We turn it into a sanctuary. The plan came together quickly. Teams were assembled, mixing different abilities for maximum effectiveness. The Wendigo and its kin would take the Arctic facility. Atlas would lead a group to the desert complex. The Skinwalkers and their shape-shifting abilities were perfect for infiltrating the urban site. As for me, I had one last mission. The heart of Project Sentinel, their headquarters, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, where I was born and where this would all end. Before we deployed, Dr. Blackwood pulled me aside. Her face had aged years in the past few hours. There's something you need to know, she said quietly, about your creation, about who you were before. I held up a hand to stop her. It doesn't matter anymore. Who I was died in your labs. What matters is who I choose to be now. She nodded, understanding. The board members will be meeting in the main facility tomorrow. They're gathering to discuss the next phase of the program. They don't know what's happened here yet. Perfect timing, I said grimly. The attack began at dawn. Across the world, Project Sentinel facilities fell one by one. Security systems designed to contain cryptids proved useless against creatures working together, using their powers in ways the scientists had never imagined possible. At the main facility, I led the strike team myself. We moved through the corridors like ghosts, our enhanced abilities making us virtually undetectable. The board members were exactly where Dr. Blackwood said they would be, gathered in their secure conference room, planning their next atrocities. They didn't even know we were there until I disabled my camouflage in the middle of their meeting. The looks on their faces, shock giving way to recognition, then fear, told me everything I needed to know about who these people really were. Project Sentinel is over, I announced. Your facilities have been compromised. Your experiments are free, and now you have a choice to make. One of them, an older man with cold eyes, reached for a hidden button under the table. I moved faster than human eyes could follow, catching his wrist. That wasn't one of the choices. In the end, they surrendered. They had no choice. We had all their files, all their secrets, enough evidence to destroy not just Project Sentinel, but the entire shadow organization behind it. What are you going to do with us? One of them asked. I looked at these people who had played at being gods, who had tortured and experimented on creatures they didn't understand. Nothing, I replied. You're going to live with what you've done, and you're going to help us fix it. In the months that followed, we transformed Project Sentinel's network into something new. The mountain facility became a true sanctuary, a place where cryptids could find safety and peace. The other sites were repurposed, some as additional sanctuaries, others as research centers dedicated to understanding and preserving these ancient species. Dr. Blackwood stayed on, working to undo the damage she had helped cause. Her knowledge was valuable, but more importantly, her presence was a reminder that people could change, could choose to be better than their past. As for me, I found a new purpose, not as a hunter, but as a protector. There are still threats out there, humans who would exploit these creatures, organizations like Project Sentinel that would turn them into weapons. But now we stand ready to face those threats together. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about who I might have been before Project Sentinel took me, but those thoughts don't haunt me anymore, because I know who I am now. Not Subject 47, not their perfect weapon, but something they never intended to create. A guardian for those who cannot guard themselves. The world is full of monsters, but not all of them are what they seem. Sometimes, the real monsters are the ones in suits and lab coats, playing with forces they don't understand. And sometimes, those they try to turn into monsters become the very thing they fear most. Heroes. This is who I am now. This is my purpose, and I'm not alone anymore.